Hello, I'm Sophie Mobbs, and I actually do train future XR professionals. My background is I did work in the games industry for 10 years, and also I've been teaching computer animation and games to students, mostly in London and for the last 2 years in Norway. So I have some experience in the industry itself, but also training professionals, well, students to become professionals in this particular industry. But first of all, I want to get off my chest a little bit of a rant about games in general. There is this distressing stereotype that people who work on games, people who play games, have a particular stereotype of being, I don't know, a spotty nerd in a darkened room who never goes outside. This is extremely frustrating. And many times I have met people and they say, what do you do? And I say, well, you know, I work in the games industry, or I teach students to work in the games industry. And they look at you like in horror. It's like as if you've just announced that you're some kind of monster. And people have said to me, oh, you teach people to do games. Children should be outside. They should be playing football. They shouldn't be indoors with these violent, horrible, bloody games, which are full of nastiness and cruelty. And I'm just like, well, you know, games are not necessarily what you might think they might be. They are much broader. And the people that play them might not be who you expect. I mean, this lady here, all ages play games now. And games have a wide variety of applications. In particular, things like XR games, VR, virtual reality, AR, augmented reality, mixed reality, where you mix VR and AR together, XR being the kind of blanket term. These games or experiences, because they're not necessarily a game, they can be a narrative, or they can be a documentary or a film or a training package. These particular games and experiences in the XR world are extremely powerful and useful in the serious applications. So for instance, you can use virtual reality to treat pain in medical situations. The thing about XR is it can be extremely engrossing, extremely immersive. When you read a book and you get really into it, when you're absorbed in a film, when you're lost in music, this is immersive. However, things like virtual reality and augmented reality, they add an extra dimension of immersion. And you can turn that to your advantage. So for instance, for treating pain, this type of research has been going on for over 10 years, where for instance, burns patients, they have to go into hospital and they have to have their bandages removed. And the pain is quite excruciating. And it's very distressing for children in particular. It's distressing for the parents watching their children crying. And there has been studies where people have used, you know, quite early on, quite clunky and basic virtual reality headsets to place on children and adults who are undergoing painful treatments. And when they're absorbed in the game, when they're absorbed in playing perhaps a snow game and they're, you know, playing with snowmen in the virtual reality world, they're less likely to be affected by the pain of having their dressings changed. And nurses have reported as well that, you know, we can change the dressings and we can still ask the child to turn this way or raise their arm, and they will do this without stopping playing the game. They can still communicate. They're not cut off from the world. It's incredibly powerful. The other serious applications that you can have is for training. You can train people to jump out of helicopters with parachutes before they have to do that. You can train people to fight fires. You can train people how to deal with difficult situations that can be stressful. All of these things can be practiced in an immersive VR world before you actually have to deal with it in real life as such. So you can gain a little bit of experience and confidence before you try this. And also for education. For education, you can take quite dry subjects and transform them and get students and children engrossed and engaged into the subjects which might be otherwise quite difficult for them. And VR has been used, for instance, for engaging students with maths and calculations and subjects which perhaps you might not expect children to be particularly excited to engage in. And of course, you can use it for research and development. You can use it to kind of test out theories and test out approaches and work out kind of scenarios. So my interest in particular, and the interest that I use with my students, is in serious games. And serious games, they don't necessarily need to be not serious as such. They can be fun, or perhaps the word is engaging, because when you're training someone in a very dry subject, then, you know, the more engaging and more engrossing you can make that training package to be, the more likely they are to complete the course or to repeat it or to practice. So it's worth thinking about. And this is what I want to kind of draw forward, because when people come to me interested in learning how to do games, when people are interested in becoming games designers, games artists, and games coders, they can get a certain level of prejudice from friends and family, from people in the outside world who think that they're just going to make some kind of violent shoot 'em up. But actually, games are much broader than that. Games can help change the world. They can be a force for good. And it's important that our students are able to kind of approach that kind of thing, to design games that are used in a more kind of holistic fashion for helping other people, for training and for medical purposes, you know, for serious games. This is an aspect that often that people don't know about and should be talked of more. So to give an example here, this is one of my students working on a particular prototype game. This was a prototype that we put together with one of the local hospitals in Norway. And researchers there had been using virtual reality games to treat elderly people with depression. And we're talking very elderly patients who have severe, profound depression. They're often in their 80s. And, you know, these are not the classic people you would be expecting to play games. Now, when you have extremely severe depression, you don't want to eat, you don't want to get out of bed, or perhaps some of these people are very frail and they can't even get out of bed at all. So by using the virtual reality, you bring something to them which helps to lift them slightly out of their depression. And then with multiple treatments, the idea is to gently raise people out of a depressive state of mind through the medium of the virtual reality game as such, with small puzzles that kind of engage and stimulate. And this particular prototype that we did here with the Inland University was a small prototype which engaged. It was designed specifically for elderly depressed patients as a sort of gentle, engaging and stimulating package to help them raise them slowly and delicately out of their depression. So again, we're talking some extremely exciting and fun and interesting applications of XR that are out there, and which genuinely students are interested in working on. I mean, there is actually quite a lot of interest from the students when they arrive at Inland University to work on these games, because particularly we have industry people coming to us saying things like, well, we've heard about VR or we've heard about AR, and maybe we could use that to train our people. Maybe we can use that to sell our product. And we have worked on various projects interspersed by getting our students to work with the industry professionals. So for instance, we had one particular, I wouldn't say game, perhaps a training package, where in the virtual reality you learned how to not necessarily fight fires, but to gauge the level of a fire, to be able to reach for a fire extinguisher and tackle that fire quickly. So the idea is you practice and practice until it becomes second nature. And then, you know, in this way, in a safe scenario, you then learn, okay, in this case, right, where is the fire extinguisher? How do I open it? Let's spray it. Let's work. Have I waited too long? Perhaps now is time to kind of leave the vicinity because it's not working. All of these things which would be very dangerous to learn in real life, but actually would be extremely handy if you build up a certain muscle memory within the virtual reality game. And there is talk as well of when you experience a virtual reality piece, the brain can process it as if it was a genuine memory. So, you know, you can use it as training. It does work. I mean, obviously, eventually, not everybody is going to want to have to fight a fire in their own home. But if they've had a little bit of practice in a virtual reality application, then perhaps they can move more swiftly into tackling the problem and then perhaps save lives and save their own lives. But I've been talking about serious games this whole time. And I just want to say at the last minute, you know, there's nothing wrong with ordinary standard games, games that are fun, games that aren't specifically about being serious, games that are genuinely just to amuse and delight people. And it just so happens about a month ago, Oxford University did a study. There are very few studies that actually look into the effects of computer games on people's mental health. I mean, there's a lot of kind of talk about, games are addictive and they're dangerous and they hurt people. The Oxford University did actually sit and try and kind of really get down to the bottom of this. And they discovered that actually video games aren't actually bad for your health and can, in fact, be good for your health. They can help your mental well-being. To a certain extent, this ties in anecdotally with some of the conversations I've had with my own students. When we went into lockdown at the beginning of this year, and students were often cut off and isolated, so I was having to meet them for Zoom tutorials, check on their well-being, making sure that they were not struggling mentally, as well as having to struggle with perhaps the studies themselves. And also talking to friends who were in lockdown, friends who had medical conditions, who were trying to shield themselves. And again, people were saying, you know what, I can't get out the house, or I'm too frightened to get out the house, or, you know, I'm in quarantine, but at least I can play, you know, I can play any kind of silly game to try and kind of raise my mental state, to kind of forget my troubles for a short while. Or I've been playing with my friends online on a kind of a multi-platform game and interacting in that way. So there was a kind of anecdotal kind of evidence, for me at least, that games were having a positive effect, which of course is lovely for my students, because, you know, even if they don't particularly want to work in serious games, if they're striving to bring out a game, whether it's VR or AR or XR, mixed reality, that brings joy to people, that perhaps allows them to escape. You know, if you're bedridden, you're in quarantine, you know, you can put your headset on and you can get out of the house, and maybe you can visit some kind of a beautiful site on the other side of the world, sit and watch Niagara Falls, or wander through some ancient ruins, or just play a simple and ordinary game. So that's my little rant. It's very close to my heart. Just to say how far we have come in a relatively short space of time. Games, and particularly XR type games, are so new and so fresh, and there's a lot to be learned and much research that needs to be done over time. So it's an exciting time, and we definitely need people to come into this kind of production of this particular type. So the artists, we need creative people, we need coders, we need people who are willing to kind of promote these games, and people who are interested to perhaps look at the way they run their businesses or run their products or run their training and go, how can we make these things more interesting? How can we make them more exciting? Perhaps there is a way to kind of bring XR into our work so that it's more efficient, perhaps, or at least more engaging. So I'll hopefully see you later.